The Aurelius Foundation Winter Gala was never my kind of place. Too bright, too polished, too full of people pretending they had nothing to lose. And yet, it was exactly where I found him again. Adrian Reyes. 7 years. I used to count them like distance, like something I could always cross back. But standing there, watching him laugh with people I didn't know, I realized something I should have understood a long time ago. Time doesn't wait. It replaces. He looked the same. Same sharp suit. Same quiet confidence. But the way he held himself, it was different. Lighter. Like he had finally put something down. And that was when it hit me. It wasn't just time that had passed. He had moved on. Completely. I didn't walk toward him right away. Somehow, my feet forgot how. People say you never forget someone you truly loved, but they don't tell you what it feels like when that person forgets you first. I watched him from a distance. The way he spoke, calm, measured. The way he smiled, polite, practiced. None of it belonged to me anymore. Then I saw her. She stood beside him like she had always been there. No hesitation, no distance, just certainty. Isabelle Laurent. And in that moment, I understood something I wasn't ready to accept. He hadn't just changed. He had chosen a life where I was no longer part of the story. I told myself to breathe, in, out. But even air felt unfamiliar here. And then he looked at me, just once, like a stranger acknowledging another stranger in a crowded room. "Clara," he said. My name. Still the same sound, but it didn't belong to the same world anymore. There was a time when silence between us didn't feel empty. It felt safe. Adrian and I weren't loud people. We never needed grand gestures to prove anything. Just small routines, shared meals, and conversations that didn't need to be finished to be understood. I remember nights when he would sit beside me, working quietly while I read, and without looking up, he would ask if I was tired, like he already knew the answer. He used to say I had a habit of forgetting myself when I chased too many things at once. And I would laugh, because I thought there was always time to slow down later. There was always later. Until there wasn't. I didn't notice when later started disappearing from our conversations. I didn't notice when his messages became shorter, when his questions stopped carrying weight, when his voice stopped waiting for mine. Back then, I thought love was something stable, something that stayed where you left it. I didn't understand that love is not patient. It adapts, or it leaves. And I was too busy moving forward to realize he had started moving without me. I didn't notice when everything started changing. At first, it was nothing, just a name I hadn't heard in years. Marcus Hale. He came back into my life the way old memories usually do, uninvited, but familiar enough that you don't push them away immediately. He was different now, sharper, more composed, the kind of confidence that didn't ask for attention, it expected it. And somehow, I listened when he spoke. It started small, a coffee meeting, a business discussion, but just catching up. He always had a reason to be near me. Always something important to say. Always something that made it difficult to leave early. I told myself it was harmless, professional, familiar. But Adrian used to say something I didn't understand back then. Not everything familiar is safe. I remember laughing when he said it. I don't laugh at it anymore. Because Marcus never raised his voice, never demanded anything. He just stayed close enough for me to stop noticing the distance I was creating elsewhere. And little by little, Adrian's voice stopped being the one I was hearing first. I told myself nothing was changing. That's the strange thing about distance. It rarely announces itself. It doesn't arrive loudly. It just quietly replaces what used to be there. At first, I still replied to Adrian's messages immediately. I still asked how his day was. I still tried to sound present. But somewhere between meetings and deadlines and Marcus's constant just 5 minutes, those replies started slowing down. Not because I didn't care. At least, that's what I told myself. Adrian never complained. He never argued. He just started asking fewer questions. At the time, I thought it was maturity. I thought he was giving me space. Now I realize it wasn't space he was giving me. It was distance. One evening, I remember him asking me if I would be free that weekend. I paused before answering. Not because I didn't want to see him, but because Marcus had already scheduled something important. I told Adrian I might be busy, just like that, as if his time could be postponed without consequence. He didn't react. He just said it's okay. And that was the problem. Everything became okay. No anger, no fight, no urgency, just silence. slowly learning how to replace love. I didn't notice I was losing him, because nothing looked like losing. I still remember the night everything shifted, even though nothing physically broke. It was just a question. But some questions don't arrive as words. They arrive like a weight settling in the room. Adrian was sitting across from me that evening. Quiet, as always. But his silence felt different, like a glass slowly filling with something it could no longer hold. Do you still want this? Us? He didn't say it loudly. He didn't need to. His voice was calm, but it carried the exhaustion of someone who had been waiting in the rain without an umbrella. I laughed softly at first, not because it was funny, but because I didn't know how else to respond. Of course I do, I said. But even I could hear the hesitation hiding behind my own words, like a shadow refusing to step into the light. He looked at me for a long moment, and in that silence, I felt something I couldn't name. Not anger, not disappointment, something quieter, final, like a door closing without sound. I told myself I was just busy. That love doesn't disappear, it just stretches, like rubber pulled too far but still intact. But Adrian didn't argue. He never raised his voice, he just nodded, as if accepting something he had already understood long before I did. And that terrified me more than any fight ever could. Because silence, when it comes from someone who once spoke to you like home, sounds a lot like goodbye. The offer came on an ordinary morning, as if life had no idea it was about to change everything. Marcus was the one who brought it to me. A position in London, higher title, twice the salary, a future people like me were supposed to want. He called it an opportunity. I called it freedom. But freedom is a strange word. It often disguises itself as escape. I remember looking at the offer letter, the words printed so cleanly on the page, as if decisions like this were meant to be easy. Adrian didn't speak at first when I told him. He just looked at me, like he was trying to recognize a version of me that was slowly becoming unfamiliar. "So that's it?" he asked quietly. Not angry, not pleading, just tired in a way I didn't understand yet. I told him it was temporary, that it was just work, that nothing between us would change. But even as I said it, the words felt like paper promises in a burning room. He nodded again, that same nod, the one that no longer argued, because it had already accepted defeat. I thought he was being understanding. Now I realize he was just preparing to let go without making a sound. And Marcus, he didn't push me. He didn't need to. He simply stood beside opportunity and let me walk toward it myself. Sometimes I wonder if the worst decisions are the ones that feel like they were never forced at all. Because I didn't feel dragged away from Adrian. I felt like I was walking willingly into a future that didn't include him. Airports have a way of making departures feel temporary, even when they are not. Changey was bright that day. Too bright, almost. Like the world was trying too hard to pretend nothing important was happening. Adrian came to see me off. He didn't say much when he arrived. Neither did I. There are moments where silence doesn't feel peaceful. It feels rehearsed, like both people already know the lines they've chosen not to say. "Take care," he said eventually. Simple words, but they sounded heavier than anything we had said before. I nodded. I told him I would come back often, that it wasn't goodbye, that it was just distance. He didn't argue. He never did anymore. He just looked at me, like a man watching something drift away from shore, knowing the water had already decided the outcome. I remember wanting to say something more, something meaningful, something final, but nothing came out right. So instead, I smiled. The kind of smile people use when they are trying to convince themselves that nothing is ending. And then I walked away. Each step felt normal at first, like any other departure. But somewhere between the boarding gate and the glass reflection of my own face, I stopped being certain I was coming back to the same life I left behind. I didn't realize it then, but that was the last time Adrian stood close enough for me to reach him. And I didn't reach. London was everything I was told it would be. Fast, sharp, relentless. The kind of city that rewards movement, but punishes stillness. I worked harder than I ever had before. Meetings blurred into nights, nights blurred into mornings. And soon, I became exactly what I was supposed to be. Successful, respected, needed. But success is a strange kind of silence. It doesn't feel empty at first. It just slowly removes everything that used to fill it. I remember sitting in my apartment one evening, glass walls reflecting a city that never stopped moving. And I realized I hadn't heard Adrian's voice in a long time. Not just physically, but anywhere in my thoughts that still felt warm. At some point, I stopped expecting messages. Not because I wanted to, but because waiting slowly turned into forgetting how to wait at all. Marcus would ask if I was happy. I would say yes. And I meant it. In the way people mean things when they've stopped comparing them to what they lost. But at night, when the city lights flickered like distant memories I couldn't touch, I started to understand something I refused to see before. I didn't move forward. I only moved away. And the further I went, the quieter everything became. I didn't notice the exact moment Adrian stopped being part of my days. It didn't happen all at once. It never does. It started with delayed replies, then unanswered messages, then conversations that never began at all. At first, I told myself he was busy, that life had simply carried us into different rhythms. But silence has a way of growing heavier the longer you ignore it. It starts to feel less like absence, and more like something standing between you and the past. I remember opening our chat one night. My message was still there, sitting beneath the last thing he ever sent me. Take care. 2 words. That was all. I used to think silence meant peace. Now I realize silence can also mean distance that has already made its decision. Marcus once asked me if I ever thought about going back. I told him no, too quickly. Because if I slowed down long enough to think about it, I might have heard what I was avoiding. Adrian wasn't waiting anymore. Not in messages. Not in time. Not in the spaces I used to assume he would always occupy. And what scared me most was how normal that silence started to feel. Like a room you slowly stop noticing is empty. Coming back to Singapore was supposed to feel familiar. Like stepping into something paused, waiting to continue. But nothing continued. The city looked the same. The streets were the same. Even the air felt unchanged. But Adrian wasn't there. At first, I thought it was just timing, that I had simply missed him. That people don't just disappear from places they once belonged to. I went to the places we used to know, the cafe where we used to sit, the streets we used to walk without purpose. But every space I entered felt like it had already forgotten him, like the world had quietly removed his name from its memory. I told myself I could find him if I tried harder. That effort could still fix absence, but effort only works when something is still there to reach. One afternoon, I finally asked, and the answer didn't come with emotion, just information. He had left, moved on, built a life somewhere I wasn't part of anymore. I remember standing still after hearing it, like my body forgot how to translate sound into meaning. Because gone is a strange word. It sounds temporary until you realize it isn't. And for the first time, I didn't know where to go next. Not because I was lost in the city, but because I was finally lost in what I had done to it. I didn't expect to see him again like that. Not after everything that had been built and everything that had quietly fallen apart. 7 years. The number didn't feel like a memory. It felt like a distance my heart had learned to live with. I hadn't seen Adrian in 7 years. Not properly. Not meaningfully. Not in a way that felt like we still belonged to the same timeline. Before that, we had been together for 3 years. 3 years that felt simple at the time, like love was something stable enough to survive anything. I used to believe that what we had built would remain, even if life pulled us in different directions. But time doesn't preserve things the way we assume it will. It rewrites them. The gala lights were softer than I remembered, or maybe I was just the one who had changed. And then I saw him. Adrian Reyes. Standing there like a sentence that had already ended, but somehow still echoed in my chest. Our eyes met. Just for a moment. And in that moment, the 7 years between us didn't feel like time. They felt like consequence. He didn't smile the way he used to. Not the way I remembered from those 3 years when everything still felt possible. Instead, he looked at me like someone acknowledging a chapter that had already been closed. Not with anger, not with longing. Just understanding that some endings don't need to be spoken twice. And for the first time, I understood what 7 years truly meant. It wasn't just time. It was everything we didn't become after we stopped choosing each other. I noticed her before I even understood what I was seeing. She stood beside him like she wasn't beside him at all, but with him, as if there had never been space between them. Isabelle Laurent. The name didn't matter at first. What mattered was the way she fit into the silence around him, not interrupting it, not challenging it, just completing it. I told myself I shouldn't feel anything, that I had no right to. But emotions don't ask for permission. They arrive like weather, uninvited, unavoidable. She smiled at him once, and he returned it. Not the hesitant kind of smile I used to know, but something steadier, more certain. It struck me then like a quiet truth I had been avoiding for years. I had once stood in that exact kind of certainty. 3 years of it. 3 years where I believed love didn't change shape, only distance. But watching them now, I realized something painful. Distance doesn't destroy love. It replaces it. I saw the way she spoke to him. Light, effortless, familiar in a way I used to be. And I understood, without needing anyone to explain it. I was no longer part of his present. Not even as a memory he reached for. Just a place he had once passed through and never returned to. And the worst part was not her standing beside him. It was how naturally she belonged there. I used to believe every decision I made was mine. That sounds obvious, until you start looking back at the moments that shaped everything. Marcus once told me something I didn't think much about at the time. Opportunities don't wait for people who hesitate. I remember how certain he sounded. Not forceful, just confident enough that I stopped questioning it. And Adrian, he was never like that. He never pushed, never insisted. He just stayed, like he believed presence alone was enough to be chosen. I see it differently now. Or maybe I'm just afraid to see it the way I used to. There were conversations I didn't question back then. Suggestions that felt like direction. Timing that always seemed just right or just wrong for Adrian. I never had proof of anything. But truth doesn't always arrive with proof. Sometimes it arrives as discomfort after everything is already finished. And the more I think about it, the more my memories feel less like choices and more like pathways I was gently guided through. I don't know if Marcus changed anything, or if I simply allowed everything else to fade because it was easier than holding on to it. But what I do know is this: I didn't just lose Adrian. I participated in it. And that thought sits heavier than any silence I've ever known. I don't know what gave me the courage to walk toward him. Maybe it wasn't courage at all. Maybe it was simply the exhaustion of staying silent for too long. He was standing near the edge of the hall, as if he always belonged slightly outside of where people gathered. And for a moment, I just watched him. Not the version I remembered, but the version time had shaped without me. Adrian. His name felt heavier than I expected when I said it, like it had been waiting years to be spoken again, and didn't recognize the voice anymore. He turned, slowly, not surprised, not shaken, just aware. There was a silence between us that didn't feel empty. It felt complete, like a sentence that no longer needed continuation, he said. The way he said my name, it didn't sound like memory. It sounded like recognition of something already placed in the past. I wanted to speak. I had rehearsed nothing but felt everything at once. 7 years of questions, 7 years of silence, 7 years of words that never found their moment. But when I opened my mouth, nothing came out in order. Only fragments, only breath, only something that didn't know how to become language anymore. And he waited. Not impatient, not curious, just still, as if he had already accepted that whatever I came here to say would not change where he now stood. I finally forced the words out before I lost the chance. Adrian, I didn't expect it to end like this. He didn't react immediately, just looked at me the way someone looks at rain after they've already accepted they'll get wet. "End?" he asked quietly. "Clara, it already ended a long time ago." I felt something tighten in my chest. Not pain yet. Something worse. Understanding arriving too late. "I didn't mean for things to become like this," I said. He nodded slightly. "Not agreement, not disagreement, just acknowledgement." "Most people don't mean for things to become anything," he replied. "They just choose, and then time does the rest." I swallowed. I was busy. I thought there was still time. For the first time, something flickered in his expression. Not anger, not hurt, something closer to finality. "That's what you always said," he said softly. "It was always later, always after this, always when things settle." He paused, then added, quieter, "But I stopped waiting for later." Silence fell between us again. He didn't fill it. Neither did I. I looked at him and asked the question I was afraid of the most. "Do you ever think about us?" He held my gaze for a long moment. "I think about what we were," he said, "not what we are." That line didn't sound cruel, it sounded finished. I tried to speak again, but he raised his hand slightly, not to stop me, but to end something gently. "Clara," he said, "some people don't come back to where they were hurt, even if they once called it home." And for the first time, I understood I wasn't part of his story anymore. Not even as a regret he carried. Just a chapter he had already closed, without hatred. Clara's epilogue. I used to think regret was loud, but it isn't. It arrives quietly, when there is nothing left to fix. I stood there long after he left. Not in place, but in meaning. 7 years. That was the distance between who we were and what we became. I didn't lose him in one decision. I lost him in every later I thought would still be enough. Every time I believed time would wait for me, it moved forward anyway. And I didn't. But time doesn't pause for understanding. It only continues. And now, there is no direction that leads back to him. Adrian's epilogue. At first, I thought distance would be temporary. I told myself she would come back once things settled, so I waited, quietly, without pressure. I sent messages that were left unanswered. "Are you free this week? How are you? Can we talk?" No anger came from her, only absence. And absence is confusing, because it doesn't reject you loudly. It simply stops responding. I tried less after that, not because I stopped caring, but because caring without response slowly wears you down. Maybe I was asking for too much. Maybe I should have been more patient, more understanding. So I gave her space. Space became months. Months became silence. And silence started to feel like an answer I didn't want to accept. There were nights I stared at my phone, not waiting anymore, just remembering what waiting used to feel like. The last time I reached out, I already knew I wouldn't get a reply. That's how I understood something had already broken. Not suddenly, but quietly. In repetition. In absence. I wasn't hoping anymore. I was confirming. And when there was still nothing, I stopped reaching. Not because I hated her. Not because I stopped caring. But because I finally understood love cannot exist alone forever. It either grows with someone, or it disappears quietly while you are still calling its name. I don't regret loving her. I regret how long I kept trying to be chosen instead of accepted. People think endings are dramatic. Mine wasn't. It was silence, repeated so many times it eventually became acceptance. And when I saw her again, I didn't feel pain. I didn't feel anger. I felt clarity. Some people don't leave your life in one moment. They leave in every unanswered message before it. And this time, I was no longer waiting for someone who had already stopped looking back.